Welcome to the very first episode of Voluntaryist Academy. My name is James Cordiner. You may know me from my previous works, A Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth, one of the co-organizers of the Shattering the Illusion Conference in 2022, content creator on the One Great Work Network. I'm also a presenter at the 2023 Seed 5 conference. For a while now, I've been on hiatus, from being present in the internet space. I've been working on my new project, Voluntaryist Academy, and I want to bring that to you today. What better day than the day where the eclipse is happening? As I'm recording this, the eclipse is happening. I'm inside. I want to do this while the eclipse is happening. Anyways, so Voluntaryist Academy, let's talk about it. What is voluntarism? Voluntarism is the political and social philosophy that all forms of human association should be voluntary and based on the non-aggression principle, or otherwise known as the NAP, N-A-P, that posits that any initiation of violence on peaceful people is illegitimate no matter what the outcome. But it does allow for the use of force in self-defense or to protect property. In other words, voluntarism is the moral position which maintains that no peaceful person can justly be submitted to the control of others in the absence of his or her own consent. Let's go real quick over the non-aggression principle. Again, this is episode 1. So later on down the road, we'll get into a lot about this. The non-aggression principle, the NAP, is an ethical and moral principle that asserts that aggression is inherently immoral and illegitimate. Aggression is defined as the, quote, initiation, unquote, of physical force against persons or property, the threat of such, or fraud upon persons or their property. In contrast to pacifism, the NAP does not prohibit self-defense. The fact that governments and their hired mercenaries, which are the military and police, routinely violate the NAP proves that they are immoral and their authority is illegitimate. Moving on. All right. So what is Voluntaryist Academy? What is this that I've created here? Well, voluntarism leads to real freedom. All other political philosophies allow a ruling class to engage in violence and coercion against the majority. Voluntarists reject the artificially indoctrinated belief system of statism in favor of true freedom through the voluntary interactions between free people. Voluntarism is the most moral and principled of all political systems. It recognizes natural law versus frequently immoral and illogical government law, or political scribbles, and voluntarism honors the non-aggression principle. Voluntarist Academy will teach all things regarding the only ism that is fair for everyone. While you are here, you can find all the resources necessary to understand this philosophy of consent. From books and articles to essays and podcasts, Voluntaryist Academy will provide you with everything you need. Voluntaryist Academy is for everyone and anyone. All right, so this is the official Voluntaryist Academy podcast. I've been reading everything off of the home screen of the Voluntaryist Academy website that is called voluntaristacademy.com. So if you desire to learn more about voluntarism, then you're in the right place. You really are. Meet Spooner. Spooner is a rugged-looking squirrel who one day came across a turtle shell. Spooner knows what's up. He says, don't hurt people and don't steal their stuff. Spooner is a pretty vocal little cartoon character. He's the official mascot of Voluntaryist Academy, okay? And the story behind Spooner is one day I was thinking about the Latin phrase labore et constantia, which translated to English basically means hard work and persistence, a constant labor. So I got to thinking of the old story of the squirrel and what was it? The squirrel and the grasshopper, and how the squirrel is diligently working away all season long so he could be prepared for winter, for the season where it would be difficult for him, the squirrel, to have the resources necessary to survive. Meanwhile, the grasshopper is just lounging around like he's on vacation all the time. And the squirrel's like, hey man, you should be doing this kind of work too. And the grasshopper's like, man, that's for the birds. Well, anyways, if you don't remember the rest of the story, winter comes, grasshopper is like, oh no, what have I done? Asks the squirrel for help. The squirrel's like, yeah, sure, man, but you got to learn your lesson. All right. And that's, if I remember correctly, where the story pretty much leaves off. Now, what about this turtle shell? What's up with that? Well, I also started thinking about the tortoise and the hare, where they challenge each other to a race, and the hare's like, I got this. And the tortoise is like, okay. And, the hare takes a nap, gets, distracted with his own, he's arrogant. He wants to lie down in the shade and take a nap. So he does. And the turtle is working hard, and he doesn't give up, and he keeps going and going and going, and he passes the hare, and he looks over. He's like, that guy's taking a nap. I don't know. That must be nice. So, but he keeps going. He ends up winning the race. So here we have an amalgamation of the two characters that come out, victorious in both stories. And that's Spooner. Spooner is named after Lysander Spooner, who's an American anarchist philosopher from the 19th century, who I've come through my research and everything to admire. And later on, throughout the next few episodes, we're actually going to be getting into some of his work, because what this podcast is going to start out doing is we're going to go through some literature. We're going to read it on the air. There are certain essays and books on tape that don't exist. The books on tape don't exist, but the books do, and I'm going to read them. I'm going to read certain essays by these political philosophers from the past and see if the ideas still stick today. The idea that came from the fact that this philosophy has been around for a very long time. It is an idea that has been hidden. It's been occulted from the majority of people. And the fact is that the right idea was around a long time ago. And if we had listened back then, fact is, regardless of what it would look like, we would not be where we are today. It might be better. In fact, I would wager to say it would be better. Instead, what we got is something that I'm going to read out of the introduction for the 2002 edition of America's Secret Establishment by Anthony C. Sutton. And you can find this book online. It's published by Tribe Day or whatever. Trine Day, sorry. And the part I wanted to read is just the introduction for the 2002 edition, because it encapsulates what we have today in the political system that we are all facing. And it goes a little something like this. America's Secret Establishment has had an unusual publishing history. The book began with an anonymous donation to the author of an 8-inch package of documents in the early 1980s. Nothing less than the membership list and supporting documents for a truly secret society, the Yale Skull and Bones. The late Johnny Johnson of Phoenix, Arizona, was the spark that moved me to write first a 4-part series and later a jumbo volume based on this material. This volume went to several editions with several publishers, even a Russian edition of 12,000 copies. Probably in the past few years, as many copies have been sold in Russia as in the United States. America's Secret Establishment has had little publicity, few reviews, ignored by mainline distributors, yet has sold steadily for the past 16 years at a rate of several hundred copies a month. This activity, in turn, has generated other articles and books by other authors. But my real intent to generate an exploration of Hegelian influence in modern America has not been fulfilled. In great part, this can be attributed to an educational system based on a statist Hegelian philosophy, and which has already achieved the, quote, dumbing down, unquote, of America. This disastrous, destructive philosophy, the source of both Nazism and Marxism, has infected and corrupted our constitutional republic. Much of the blame for this corruption is with an elitist group of Yaley, quote, bonesmen, unquote. Their symbol of skull and bones and their Hegelian philosophy says it all, although with typical duplicity, they would have you believe otherwise. Hegelianism glorifies the state, the vehicle for the dissemination of statist and materialist ideas and policies in education, science, politics, and economics. Wonder why we have a, quote, dumbed down, unquote, society? Look no further than the Bonesman Troika, who imported the Prussian education system in the U.S. in the 19th century. A political philosophy in direct opposition to the classical liberalism nurtured in the 19th century British and American history. In classical liberalism, the state is always subordinate to the individual. In Hegelian statism, as we see in Nazism and Marxism, the state is supreme, and the individual exists only to serve the state. Our two-party Republican and Democrat equal one Hegelian party, no one else welcomed or allowed. System is a reflection of this Hegelianism. A small group, a very small group, by using Hegel, can manipulate and to some extent control society for its own purposes. More than that, reflect on their pirate flag, an emblem found on poison bottles, the symbol of the Nazi Death Head Division in World War II. Not only did Skull and Bones become a major force in drug smuggling, the Bush and Prescott families in the 1860s, but in true Hegelian fashion generated the antithesis, the so-called, quote, war on drugs, unquote. This hypocritical policy maintains the price of drugs, controls supply, and puts millions in jail while the gainers, in great part, are none other than the same, quote, bonesmen, unquote, who passed the laws to prohibit bonesmen, that's the Bonesman Taft of 1904. Right and left, a control device. For Hegelians, the state is almighty and seen as, quote, the march of God on earth, unquote. Indeed, a state religion. Progress in the Hegelian state is through contrived conflict. The clash of opposites makes for progress. If you can control the opposites, you dominate the nature of the outcome. We trace the extraordinary Skull and Bones influence in a major Hegelian conflict, Nazism versus communism. Skull and Bones members were in the dominant decision-making positions. Bush, Harriman, Stimson, Lovett, and so on. Sorry, that's Stimson. All Bonesmen, and instrumental in guiding the conflict through the use of right and left. They financed and encouraged the growths of both philosophies and controlled the outcome to a significant extent. This was aided by the, quote, reductionist, unquote, division in science, the opposite of historical, quote, wholeness, unquote. By dividing science and learning into narrower and narrower segments, it became easier to control the whole through the parts. In education, the Dewey system was initiated and promoted by Skull and Bones members. Dewey was an ardent statist and a believer in the Hegelian idea that the child exists to be trained to serve the state. This requires suppression of individualist tendencies and a careful spoon-feeding of approved knowledge. This, quote, dumbing down, unquote, of American education is not easily apparent unless you have studied in both foreign and domestic U.S. universities. Then the contrast becomes crystal clear. This dumbing down is now receiving attention. Two excellent books are The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt, published by the Conscience Press in Ravenna, Ohio in 2001, and The Dumbing Down of America by John Taylor Gatto. Both books trace this process to the impact of education, and both give remarkable detail of the process. We go no further in that we trace the import of the system to 3 Yaleys, members of Skull and Bones. For Iserbyt, in The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, the American education system begins with Rockefeller and Gates. But in fact, this statist system is a reflection of the Hegelian ideas brought to the United States by the Skull and Bones troika of Gilman, White, and Dwight, and then financed by Rockefeller. People control. Today in California, one can see in real time the use of controlled conflict to achieve a desired outcome. The debate over the energy crisis is carefully contained to a debate over price caps and price control. Republicans want no caps and no controls. Most Democrats want price controls through caps. But look at what is not discussed anywhere. The entire spectrum of almost free energy, based on a decade of research, and is carefully kept out of the discussion. Isn't this highly relevant to an energy crisis? In fact, the existence of free energy systems just down the road is the reason for the controlled debate. Mill's blacklight power now has its patents, and some utilities have already bought in. Bearden's MEG, or MEG, energy from space, is under discussion. Working models exist. The maligned cold fusion has hundreds of successful experiments, but so far as we know, cannot be repeated with sufficient assurance. Other systems have come into the view of government agencies and then disappear from sight. A knowing public would ask, why are these not included in the discussion? Simple, because the utilities know they are for real, and only a few years down the road. The problem for utilities is not the price of energy today, but how to dump their fixed assets, like hydro plants, transmission lines, etc., onto the public. These, quote, valuable, unquote, assets will have zero value down the road because all new systems are standalone units, which don't need fixed plant and transmission lines. If the public is aware of the dilemma of the utilities, the ability to dump assets onto the state is heavily reduced. The Republican and Democrat debate over caps is a diversion. The relevant question carefully avoided is, how long will it take to get these new systems into production? Another example is Monsanto Corporation development of genetic engineering and predator seeds, a barely concealed effort for world domination of agriculture. President George Bush Jr., a bonesman, appoints a Monsanto vice president, Dr. Virginia Weldon, as Director of Food and Drug Administration, which has the power to block labeling of genetically engineered foods and pass on other corporate control efforts. Just before this, in new technology, we had the 1989 dramatic announcement of cold fusion. When this announcement was made public, George Bush, president at the time, this is senior, also a bonesman, called establishment scientist, the late physicist Seagram, into his office and gave instructions. We don't know what was said, but we know what happened. Cold fusion, a valid process for free energy, as was subsequently revealed, was slandered and harassed by the establishment, no doubt fearful of what free energy would do to the oil industry. What is to be done? If the voting public was even vaguely aware of this rampant and concealed scenario, it could, and possibly would, force change. However, this is not a likely possibility. Most people are go-along types with limited personal objectives and a high threshold for official misdeeds. What was taken over a century to establish cannot be changed in a few years. The initial question is education. To eliminate the Hegelian system that stifles individual initiative and trains children to become mindless zombies serving the state. We need a lot less propaganda for, quote, education, unquote, and a more individual, creative search for learning. instead of more money for education, we need to allocate a lot less. The existing system of education is little more than a conditioning mechanism. It has little to do with education in the true sense, and a lot to do with control of the individual. It is more likely that time, rather than the voting booth, will erode the secret power of this Yale group. Nothing this outrageous can survive forever. That is the introduction written by Anthony Sutton for his book, America's Secret Establishment. And I, James Cordiner, really wanted to share that with all of you guys because in the future of this show, we will be dissecting the American education system. We're going to be dissecting the political establishment, and we're going to be exposing it for what it really is in hopes to help you, whoever decides to listen and view this podcast, understand that there are options available where we don't need to perform coercion, threats of force upon one another, where we can really live free as individuals in a peaceful world. To close out with this first ever episode of Voluntaryist Academy, I want to draw your attention to the One Great Work Network. And I want to tell you to go over there. I've been over at the One Great Work Network for quite some time now. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. Over 70 content creators that are exposing the truth of this world, ending slavery one mind at a time. And I'd also like to raise your attention to the autonomy course hosted by Richard Grove, and go over there and see if it's right for you. You can find all this at voluntaristacademy.com, and you can just click on the pictures there and it'll send you right over. Autonomy is a wonderful course that will help you really gain some confidence and bring your ideas to the market. And as always, you got to consider that for yourself. My name is James Cordiner. You've just listened to the first ever Voluntaryist Academy. Go over to voluntaristacademy.com and explore the new website. And I can't wait to see you guys in the future. Just always remember one thing. If you can take one thing away from anything that I ever say, you own yourself. That's the motto here at Voluntarist Academy. You own yourself. No one else owns you. You're not a slave. Okay? You own yourself. How many times can I say it? No masters, no rulers. That's what we want. I love you all. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.